300 of the most powerful people in Silicon Valley were in that room that night. Billionaires, senators, and CEOs who could write a check and change an industry before dessert. Everyone was networking. Everyone was performing. Everyone was chasing someone more important than the last person they'd just spoken to. But in the corner of that glittering ballroom, right next to a potted ficus that nobody had spoken to all evening either, sat a young woman that everybody had walked past, looked through, and quietly decided didn't matter. She was the daughter of the most powerful person in the room and nobody saw her. Nobody except the man with the clipboard and the earpiece who was supposed to be managing the chandeliers and the catering and the microphone levels. Luke Morris wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't a senator. He didn't have a seat at any of those tables, but he did something that night that none of those important people thought to do. He crossed the room and he asked her to dance. This is the story of what happened next and why she looked him in the eye and said 4 words he never forgot. "I won't forget you." Welcome to Kindness Arena. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and unseen connections that change lives, please help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers. Help me show her that stories like this matter and deserve to be heard by hitting the subscribe button, liking the video, comment your thoughts, where you are watching from, and share it with someone who needs it to stay motivated. Your support keeps these powerful true stories alive. The Grand Meridian Hotel had never looked more impressive. 300 crystal chandeliers cascaded from a ceiling that seemed to touch heaven itself, pouring warm golden light across a ballroom dressed in midnight blue and silver. The stage at the far end of the room displayed a single banner in elegant silver font: Tech Forward Fundraising Gala, Building Tomorrow, Together. Luke Morris had been awake since 4 in the morning. He stood near the service entrance now, clipboard in hand, earpiece threading down the back of his collar, running through his mental checklist for the 14th time. Catering confirmed. AV team confirmed. Security detail confirmed. Guest seating confirmed. The jazz quartet in the corner were already warming up, the soft wail of a saxophone curling through the air like smoke. Luke was 34 years old, stocky with a warm brown complexion, and had the kind of calm eyes that people instinctively trusted in a crisis. He had been organizing events for 9 years, conferences, product launches, charity galas, and he had learned long ago that the real work of an event organizer was not the flower arrangements or the lighting rigs. It was watching. Reading the room. Anticipating the invisible moments before they became visible problems. Tonight was the biggest event of his career so far. Every heavy hitter in Silicon Valley's extended universe had RSVP'd. There was Senator Caldwell with his permanent campaign smile. There was Diana Voss, the data privacy queen who had once testified before 3 different governments in a single month. There was Frank Ocat of Ocat Dynamics, who had flown in from Sydney just for the evening, and then there was Patty Thomas. Patricia "Patty" Thomas. CEO of Thomas Tech Global. Worth somewhere north of $2 billion depending on which quarter you asked. The woman was a force of nature, silver-haired, razor-sharp, legendary for her ability to command every room she walked into simply by existing inside it. When Patty Thomas laughed, people around her laughed. When she frowned, conversations paused mid-sentence. She had built her empire from a 2-bedroom apartment in Detroit, and she wore that origin story like a medal. She arrived at 7:22 p.m., 8 minutes before the official start, and every camera in the room swung toward her instinctively. Luke noticed something else, though. He noticed the young woman walking slightly behind her. Sheila Thomas was 26. She walked with the careful posture of someone who had spent years learning how to take up exactly the right amount of space, not too much, not too little, just enough to get from one place to another without incident. She wore a deep burgundy evening gown that fit her beautifully, her natural hair pinned up in an elegant crown. On the left side of her face and neck, a spread of burn scarring caught the light, pale and textured against her dark brown skin, a permanent cartography of something painful that had happened long ago. Sheila was lovely. Anyone paying attention would have seen that immediately, but nobody was paying attention to Sheila. They were paying attention to her mother. Luke watched from across the room as Patty Thomas was swallowed whole by the evening. Senator Caldwell swept in to kiss her hand. Diana Voss appeared at her elbow with champagne and a whispered joke. Frank Ocat boomed her name across the room like a proclamation. Within 4 minutes of arriving, Patty Thomas had become the gravitational center of the entire gala, and every important person in that ballroom was orbiting her. Sheila drifted to the side. She found a chair near the wall, close to a potted ficus that nobody had spoken to all evening either, and she sat down quietly. She placed her clutch purse on her lap, folded her hands over it, and looked out at the room with the patient expression of someone who had done this many times before. Not bitterness, exactly. Something quieter than that. Something that had made peace with itself. Luke kept moving. He had 1,000 things to manage. The keynote speaker needed a microphone adjustment. One of the catering staff had spilled a tray of shrimp cocktails near the east corridor and needed discreet backup. A photographer was shooting from an angle that blocked the access route to the stage. Luke handled all of it swiftly, efficiently, invisibly the way good event organizers always do. But he kept coming back to that corner of the room. Over the next 40 minutes, he watched 3 different people approach Sheila's area of the room, make brief eye contact with her, and then redirect themselves towards someone more networked, more powerful, more immediately useful to their evening. He watched a group of young tech executives take the table nearest to her, pull their chairs inward into a tight circle of shared ambition, and exclude her entirely without even meaning to. He watched a waiter refill the water glasses of the 6 people closest to her and skip hers without noticing. He watched Sheila notice all of it, and still she sat there, composed, holding her clutch purse, occasionally glancing at her phone with the careful casualness of someone trying to look unbothered. Luke finished relaying an instruction into his earpiece, tucked his clipboard under his arm, straightened his jacket, and walked across the ballroom. He crouched slightly as he reached her, not in a condescending way, but so that he wasn't looming over her, so that they were closer to eye level. "Hi," he said. "I'm Luke. I'm the event organizer tonight." He extended his hand. "I just wanted to make sure you have everything you need." Sheila looked at him for a moment with a careful assessment in her eyes, the look of someone checking whether kindness was genuine or performance. "I'm fine, thank you," she said. Her voice was low and precise, like she chose each word thoughtfully before releasing it. "Good," Luke said. He didn't leave. "Is this your first tech-forward event?" A small pause. "Third, actually." "Then you know they always make the shrimp cocktails too small." Something shifted in her face. Not a full smile yet, but the architecture of one beginning to form. "I did notice that." "Criminal," Luke said solemnly. "Absolutely criminal. I filed a formal complaint with myself and I'm still waiting to hear back." This time she smiled, brief but real, like a light switched on in a room that had been dark for a while. They talked. Luke stayed longer than his clipboard probably recommended. He learned that Sheila had a master's degree in environmental policy from Johns Hopkins. She was trying to launch a nonprofit that connected green energy infrastructure to underserved rural communities. That she had a complicated relationship with these events, her mother's world, not entirely hers, but she came anyway because her mother asked and because somewhere in these rooms, she hoped, there might be one conversation that mattered. Luke listened the way he had trained himself to listen at events fully, without scanning the room over someone's shoulder, without calculating his next move while they were still speaking. "You know," he said after a while, "there's a kind of courage in showing up to rooms that don't automatically make space for you. Most people don't do it." Sheila looked at him with those careful eyes. "Most people don't have to." He acknowledged that with a small nod. No argument. No hollow consolation. Just acknowledgement. Then the jazz quartet, who had been playing a warm, meandering background melody all evening, shifted into something new. The saxophonist leaned into a slow, gorgeous opening line, something between a waltz and a ballad, the kind of music that made the air feel different. Luke stood up. He held out his hand. "Would you like to dance?" Sheila stared at his hand. "I don't think this is really a dancing event." "It will be in approximately 15 seconds, he said, with complete confidence. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the dance floor, empty, exposed, very much in the center of a room full of industry dignitaries, cameras, and carefully constructed social dynamics. Then she took his hand. Luke Morris was not, by his own assessment, a spectacular dancer. But he was steady. He held her properly, at the right distance, with his hand firm and respectful at her back. He kept the rhythm without showing off. He gave her enough to follow without making her feel like she was being steered. They moved onto the floor. It took about 6 seconds for people to notice. Not because of anything dramatic, no spotlight swung toward them, no music crescendoed. People simply noticed because it was worth noticing. A man in an event organizer's earpiece, dancing with a young woman in a burgundy gown, in the middle of a tech fundraising gala, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Conversations dimmed by a degree. Heads turned. Patty Thomas turned. Luke saw it happen. The CEO's eyes found her daughter across the room, and something moved across the older woman's face that had nothing to do with billion-dollar valuations or quarterly reports. Something softer and older than all of that. Her hand, mid-gesture in conversation with Senator Caldwell, went still. On the dance floor, Sheila had stopped thinking about who was watching. She was simply dancing. Her head was up. Her shoulders were back. The burgundy gown caught the chandelier light and turned warm and luminous around her. The scarring on her face caught that same light and became, in that moment, simply a part of her, not a before or an after, not a thing to be managed or explained or ignored. Just her. Just Sheila Thomas, dancing with a man who had walked across the room and asked. Luke guided them through a gentle turn. "You're good at this," he said quietly. "Don't sound so surprised," she said, but she was smiling when she said it fully this time, no holding back. The song lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds. When it ended, there was a moment of natural, unplanned applause from the nearby tables. Light, warm, genuine. The jazz quartet's bassist caught Luke's eye and gave him a small nod. Luke nodded back. He walked Sheila back to her corner of the room, except her corner of the room didn't feel like a corner anymore. 3 people moved toward her within the following 2 minutes, including Diana Voss, who had noticed the whole thing and decided, with the instinct of someone who recognized interesting people, that she wanted to know who Sheila Thomas was beyond the name. Luke shook Sheila's hand formally, the way you do when the professional boundaries must be lovingly maintained. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," he said. She held his hand for just a moment longer than a handshake required. "Luke Morris," she said, looking at him with those careful eyes that were not so guarded anymore. "Event organizer." "That's me." She smiled, the full, unheld version. "I won't forget you." He smiled back, tucked his clipboard under his arm, pressed his earpiece, and walked back into the organized chaos of the evening he was running. But he carried those 4 words with him for a long time after. Some moments don't make the highlight reel. No camera caught the exact look on Sheila Thomas's face when Luke held out his hand. No journalist filed a story about a dance at a gala. Patty Thomas never mentioned it publicly, though she did, 3 months later, quietly make a significant donation to a non-profit working in green energy infrastructure for rural communities. Luke Morris went on to organize 11 more major events that year. But he always said that the Grand Meridian Gala was his finest work, not because of the chandeliers, or the catering, or the keynote that went perfectly to time. Because of 4 minutes and 12 seconds on an empty dance floor, and the fact that he noticed. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness is never wasted and that even a broken path can lead to beautiful places and change of lives, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today and subscribe to Kindness Arena because your support keeps stories like this alive and spreading. Tell us in the comment what you would have done differently if you were the young girl. Would you have danced with him? Or has a stranger's kindness ever changed your life in ways you didn't expect? Would love to hear your story.